Hello and welcome to Unbuilt Giants, a series that looks at the development and demise of some of history's most notable and sometimes bizarre skyscraper projects. SkyCity 1000 was an ambitious conceptual design for a self-contained vertical metropolis proposed in 1989 by the Takenaka Corporation at the peak of Japan's economic bubble. Envisioned as a 1-kilometer tall superstructure in Tokyo, it was intended to accommodate tens of thousands of residents and workers across 14 massive, dish-shaped space plateaus stacked within a single skyscraper. Combining residential, commercial, educational, and recreational facilities, the project aimed to address urban overcrowding and land scarcity through vertical expansion rather than outward sprawl. Though never realized, SkyCity 1000 remains one of the most iconic examples of late 20th century megastructure proposals, representing both the era's technological optimism and its detachment from economic and practical constraints. In the years preceding the proposal of SkyCity 1000, Tokyo was experiencing one of the most intense and speculative real estate booms in modern history. Fueled by the Japanese asset price bubble of the 1980s, land prices in the capital skyrocketed to levels previously unimaginable. At the peak of this economic phenomenon, it was not uncommon for land to account for up to 90% of a development project's overall budget. This disproportionate cost structure meant that, paradoxically, even the most ambitious and technologically demanding construction projects could appear economically rational. The physical building, no matter how complex, tall, or experimental, represented only a fraction of the total expenditure when compared to the immense financial weight of the land beneath it. In this unusual financial climate, many architects, engineers, and developers began to look upward rather than outward. Traditional horizontal expansion had become prohibitively expensive and spatially impractical, especially in central Tokyo, where open plots of land were nearly non-existent. The idea of vertical urbanism, once relegated to theoretical discussions and science fiction, began to take hold as a serious and potentially viable solution to the country's deepening urban challenges. Super-tall and high-density structures were no longer just architectural spectacles or futuristic fantasies. They became conceivable tools for accommodating population growth, mitigating sprawl, and preserving limited green space. These structures promised to consolidate living, working, and recreational spaces into single, self-contained environments, thereby reducing the pressure on traditional infrastructure and transportation networks. Visionary design firms, inspired by both necessity and the opportunity to redefine the future of urban life, began developing concepts that merged cutting-edge engineering with utopian urban planning ideals. These proposals often fused elements of ecological sustainability, technological integration, and community self-sufficiency. Within this environment of inflated land values and architectural experimentation, SkyCity 1000 emerged not merely as a symbol of technological bravado, but as a reasoned response to the economic and spatial contradictions of Tokyo's urban landscape at the end of the 1980s. The proposed structure was intended to reach a staggering height of 1,000 meters, or approximately 3,281 feet, making it by far the tallest man-made structure in the world, had it been built. Its base was to span 400 meters in diameter, giving the structure a solid and imposing footprint, roughly equivalent to 50 standard city blocks. The total floor area was projected to be around 8 square kilometers, or over 3 square miles, an amount of usable space greater than that of many small towns. The design called for a self-contained vertical metropolis, that could address the mounting pressures of population growth, limited land availability, and environmental degradation in one of the world's most densely populated urban regions. The architectural form of SkyCity 1000 was especially distinctive. It was to be made up of 14 enormous, dish-shaped platforms stacked vertically, referred to as space plateaus. These plateaus were not merely floors, but vast, multi-level decks, each of which would contain a rich mixture of land uses. Residential zones, commercial districts, educational institutions, entertainment venues, and public facilities would all be interwoven throughout the plateaus, allowing residents to live, work, and socialize without ever needing to leave the building. The interior core of each plateau would host parks and green belts envisioned as communal gardens and oxygen-generating zones that would help reduce the building's ecological footprint. The outer edges were to be lined with high-rise apartment units, providing panoramic views of Tokyo and beyond. The vision was for each plateau to function as a neighborhood in its own right, integrated vertically into a single superstructure. Housing capacity was a central element of the design. The building was expected to accommodate between 35,000 and 36,000 full-time residents, offering a mix of private and shared living spaces. In addition, the commercial and business areas were to support up to 100,000 workers, effectively making SkyCity 1000 a vertical city with a daytime population exceeding that of many regional capitals. This high-density, mixed-use concept drew inspiration from earlier utopian urban planning models, including Le Corbusier's Ville radieuse and Paolo Soleri's Arcology, but expanded upon them at a scale never before attempted. Engineering and safety considerations were fundamental to the feasibility studies surrounding the project. SkyCity 1000 was to be constructed using state-of-the-art materials capable of withstanding Japan's seismic activity and high wind conditions. Fire safety was a particular concern, given the enormous volume of people the structure would contain and the difficulty of reaching high elevations in emergency situations. Tokyo's only fire helicopter at the time was utilized in simulation drills to explore worst-case scenarios. These tests aimed to determine the time required to access various levels of the tower and identify potential limitations in aerial firefighting. To address vertical transport within the megastructure, the concept included the use of triple-decker high-speed elevators, an innovation that was prototyped in laboratories outside of Tokyo. These elevators were intended to move large numbers of people quickly between plateaus, with each lift capable of serving multiple stops in a single trip. The design incorporated numerous lift shafts and emergency stairwells throughout the core of the building to ensure redundancy and occupant safety. As mentioned, in the face of the tower's monumental dimensions, architect Kisho Kurokawa observed that developers in Tokyo often allocated as much as 90% of their project budgets solely to land acquisition, leaving just 10% for the construction itself. In such a distorted market, even wildly ambitious projects like SkyCity 1000 could appear financially viable on paper. However, this optimism was short-lived. When Japan's asset bubble burst in the early 1990s, it triggered a prolonged economic downturn known as the Lost Decade, and with it, the flow of capital and enthusiasm for speculative megaprojects dried up almost overnight. Investors became wary, large-scale funding disappeared, and SkyCity 1000, once a symbol of futuristic ambition, was shelved indefinitely. Beyond the financial collapse, formidable technical and engineering obstacles contributed to the project's demise. While efforts to combat concerns regarding fire and seismic activity had been integrated into the initial concept, these efforts were largely theoretical, and questions about the tower's structural integrity, emergency evacuation systems, and fire suppression capabilities persisted. Moreover, the choice of location posed further hurdles. Tokyo's central districts were already densely developed, and finding an appropriate site of sufficient scale was difficult. Some proposed building it on reclaimed land in Tokyo Bay, but this raised concerns about ground stability, soil liquefaction during earthquakes, and the immense logistical complexity of offshore construction. Despite these setbacks, Sky City 1000 never completely faded from public or professional memory. In 2003, it featured in an episode of Extreme Engineering on the Discovery Channel, which explored the challenges and concepts behind its design. Nearly a decade later, in 2012, the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat cited it as one of the most compelling examples of visionary vertical urbanism. The CTBUH praised its ambitious scope and its ecological intention, integrating green spaces, internal transport systems, and mixed-use functionality to create a self-contained habitat that could potentially alleviate urban sprawl and reduce pressure on land use. Although it remains a paper project, Sky City 1000 continues to be referenced in architectural theory, urban design discourse, and speculative engineering literature. It stands as a powerful case study of how visionary thinking can clash with real-world constraints, financial, environmental, and technical. Like other conceptual megastructures of the time, such as the Exceed 4000 or the Millennium Tower, it represents both the extraordinary potential of human imagination and the sobering limitations of implementation. Sky City 1000 endures, not as a building, but as a symbol, a vertical dream born in a speculative era, grounded by economic reality and the formidable demands of nature. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more episodes coming soon. See you next time.